Professor Darrell Hamamoto joins us. Thank you so much. I wanted to air that just to break down what you're talking about. I'm going from memory, but I think the first time you visited with us was maybe 6 months ago, and you were predicting they were trying to start a massive new racial division along every line as their social engineering program goes into high gear. That has indeed happened, Professor, as you predicted it. One of the top experts on this type of social engineering. Break down what you currently think's going on.
Well, first, let me address that clip that you just aired. For me, the way I look at it, this is a living example of the woman who's the product most likely of multi-generational state-managed welfarism, which upper middle class and professional blacks in the professions and the service industry manage as a comprador class. This is what you see on Fox News and CNN and individuals going on talking about how your children belong to the state, versus a recent immigrant from Africa, south of the Sahara, whose family does not have a history of welfarism, who are entrepreneurs and are interested in only earning a livelihood for their families. But perhaps a better representation of sentiment amongst the Black underclass is a very poignant encounter between Joel Gilbert, the director, in his new DVD, his documentary. I think it's called A Place Called Utopia, where he goes into a Detroit neighborhood and interviews welfare recipients, so-called welfare, because it's not really welfare. It's modern neo-plantation slavery. And he polls them, he's canvassing them, he's trying to get their sentiments, their ideas about what it's like. And it's quite impressive, the sense of not just struggle, but resistance to this system that's keeping them down. They're dimly aware of it, and they don't like it. They want off of it. They want to contribute. They want to work. They want to be productive. And that's innate to all humanity. We want to produce. We want to reproduce. We want to extend ourselves as a species into the future. And work is a linchpin of that very idea of civilization. And that's been stripped of us here in America systematically over the years, and it's accelerating. And the bad news, it's now the middle class, including middle class professionals, are the next group to fall.
And that's the Agenda 21 globalist plan on record. I want you to break down why the ruling system has decided to go to this. They've got the robots coming out to replace us, even the military to be replaced. Men aren't even going to be able to fight anymore, even though there's obvious cultural problems with war. That is still an instinct that has a proper place. That's to be removed. Women can't be feminine anymore. They really want it homogenized. They claim they want sexual liberation and freedom, but really the end game, in my view, is to actually end our sexual natures and actually end our diversity. It's an anti-human movement.
It's going to be a monoculture, mono-government, monosexuality, mono-everything. It's going to be synthesized into the type of utopian equality that your Huxley-type people have been envisioning for close to 100 years now. But in thinking about some of your earlier comments in today's program, including pension bust-outs and all that, I more and more understand that places like the University of California are really the microcosm of this plan. It's a microcosm of the New World Order, if you will, that will be imposing this regime, and it's in an advanced stage of imposing this regime of GMOs, which are affecting our intellect, our reproductive capacity, bringing in the borderless economy, so-called, sin fronteras, right? The into-nationhood, the international sovereignty, the genderless society, and then, very importantly, ethnic balkanization. So the question is, these ideas, these pieces of social, political, economic, and cultural engineering don't come out of nowhere. They have a genesis. They have a point of origin. And one of the main points of origin is the University of California. Most of these agenda items that are being implemented by the quote-unquote New World Order are funded by the foundations. I have been a recipient of these foundation grants. And this is what they, the people who print the money, including private family foundations, they go in there and they set an agenda by doling out money in specific areas only. You notice that the Soros Foundation or the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they do not fund initiatives that deal with neighborhood entrepreneurialism, immigrant business entrepreneurialism, or anything that has to do with the free market or any other aspects of a free and healthy society.
Anything decentralized, they are against it. And when you look at the plan, they all say it's liberal, classical American liberalism, but it's the opposite of liberalism. It is a Borg, hive, post-human system.
It's post-human, it's transhuman, and it's, I guess the best image is that it's a molester that's handing you the candy. You know, it's quite seductive. Someone like Gruber, of course, is motivated by status. He was the kid in junior high school who had his gym trunks pulled down, and he spent the rest of his life trying to pay back all these bullies. And that's really endemic to academia. What you're seeing is Gruberismo, I call it. And it's all these very, very little people who happen to be somewhat smart and they have credentials. And they're, well, I don't know if I can psychoanalyze, but they're paying back to society, but they're also getting the rewards and the recognition and the accolades by these illusory.
Well, sure, I watched a bunch of those videos in full, not just the clips we played, and he would be there teaching professors and PhD students how to lie and how the world really works. So I guess you get a PhD now, according to him, to learn the inside baseball of pure BS. And whereas that always went on from what I've seen in some special PhDs in the last 100 years in this country, in England and Germany, it wasn't like they'd get on C-SPAN and brag about it. So it does show really the arrogance of how stupid they think we are.
It's arrogance, and I was listening to one of your earlier interviews this week. I forgot who the guest was, but he referred to it as a narcissism, a lot of these high-ranking military.
That's Dr. Steve Pachenik, yeah.
Dr. Steve Pachenik, great mind, great intelligence, and great analyst, and I really enjoy listening to him. His fiction's not so great, but I like him as a political analyst. I read everything. I check into all your guests. But yes, it's endemic to all the institutions. This is maybe the outgrowth of the me generation, the narcissistic generation of the 1960s, which was also a psyop, which was also a product of culture engineering. We're seeing this. We have to, going into the next year, 2015, learn a bit of humility and reject hubris, because universally and through time, the poets, the writers have warned us in so many different ways that this is what happens to individuals like Gruber. And he's just emblematic of a large number and growing numbers of people, even people of the underclass who feel that they're entitled to have a free bottle of water. So we have to, I think, look very deeply into our souls over the holidays and see what we can do to help inspire young people. For example, I'm an educator, and I'm trying to teach these values. Fortunately, a lot of my students are the children of immigrants, of refugees. They understand the work ethic. They understand the sacrifices that their parents are making for them. And they understand through their parents the value of enterprise, family, and all really basic core American values.
So do they understand how the social engineers are trying to co-opt them?
Exactly. And I warn them not to fall into the clutches of the university curricular establishment and student services, which has taken that energy, taken that vitality, that youth, that idealism, warping it, twisting it, and misdirecting it, and smashing it with the end game of destroying their spirit and their soul. So they, too, will enter this new, larger controlled welfare system. This is what's going on, I think, nationally, talking to different colleagues.
That's right.
Young people are really, really being assaulted, including their finances, student debt. It's pretty common now in even corporate media that the amount of student debt is much, much worse and higher and much more, it will be more devastating.
And they're going to bankrupt education when they're done with the bubble and then nationalize it fully, just like they're going to bankrupt the pensions, then nationalize it. But it's not even nationalized, it's private interest. We're being conquered, and the minute people realize that, it's game over. Now, obviously, the Republican Party's full of a bunch of crooks at the top, but this major political realignment, now Boehner is ignoring all of it. They're going to go with the open border. They're going to go with the banker bailouts. They're going to sign on to derivative bailouts. Just more and more and more. But politically, they did send a bunch of new people there who are trying to fight against that, some of them. But I think the message, even though imperfect, shows there is an awakening happening.
There's a mass awakening, even large numbers and growing numbers of self-satisfied professors who live in college towns and think they're immune from the currents of economic decline, and think that they really believe that race, ethnicity, and gender is the end-all and be-all of understanding. And it only explains a really, really small part of the problems that we're facing. So what I have done in order to get them into the tent, so to speak, is to bring to their attention that their security is an illusion. Their retirement, their pension, the UC investment fund has been eyed hungrily by the wolves of Wall Street for many years now. And they're just waiting for an opportune time to go in there for the kill. They're kind of circling the prey right now. They're taking their pulse. But once I make my colleagues aware that this is their strategy, and they have Janet Napolitano in place there, and they have the MRAPs and the militarized campuses there in case there's any sort of dissent, and they have the students bought off in their little ethnic identity politics going on.
They got them nicely balkanized and segregated like the old city of Rome.
Precisely. We have all the different factions and perpetual tension. And they bring in presidents or chancellors such as Linda Katehi, who's a Greek national. I don't know if she's even a U.S. citizen, who, according to my research, and this is how you attack them. You do your homework, you find the biography. It's very easy. It's open source. And she comes from a network, an international network to nationalize and socialize and globalize institutions of higher education.
Of course.
Of course, absolutely. And she was one of the leading consultants for the destruction of the higher education system in Greece.
Yep.
And that is coterminous with the destruction of the larger Greek economy. They go hand in hand.
Well, notice how they use mainstream media. This is a formulae to attack and dumb people down, but then that discredits it. Then they just get rid of it entirely and have nothing but direct government pronouncements. This is the plan. The people that sell out to it within 20, 30 years end up being betrayed, and now it's compressing where it's happening quicker and quicker.
That's right. Individuals like Linda Katehi and her underlings and Janet Napolitano and even Professor Gruber, they think that they can outrun the history train, but they won't be able to. They'll be pulled out beneath it, just like the rest of us, perhaps a little bit later down the line.
It really is crazy. I mean, Congress thought they could turn the NSA loose to spy on everybody and that they wouldn't be spied on and blackmailed by it, and now we know what's going on.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we have information and data, and Rupert Murdoch in Britain is involved in the hacking scandal. Even the royals have most of their personal information in the database for blackmail and control.
Exactly, and we see all these pedophile scandals coming out now to force England to go into the EU. This is really a diabolical plan, and I don't know how the couple thousand people, even the Kissinger Group says it's less than 6,000 people that manage it, only a few dozen families that run it. They have created a monster to dominate us that will be the monster that undoubtedly destroys them. Professor, stay with us. We'll be right back on the other side. I want to give you the floor for 7-8 minutes to talk about whatever you think's front and center instead of me asking the questions. Then we're going to take some calls.
Great. First, Alex, congratulations on your 20 years of broadcasting. Your work, the contributions of your fine guests, your reportage team has directly influenced and informed not just my lectures, which of course has reached any number of students by now, but also my scholarship. There's a new book of mine that's in the mail to you that explicitly acknowledges your contribution to my own intellectual development.
Well, thank you. I'm honored. I can't wait to maybe carry the book and obviously have you on about it once I've read it.
Absolutely. And also, just as sort of a experiment, 10 minutes prior to having this conversation with you, I took some Secret 12. It's basically liquid B12 vitamins, put it sublingually. And I take this right before the lectures because my goal is to be as fluid and slick as Joel Osteen, one of our favorite glitter bug preachers for the international audience.
Well, you're a sweetheart for plugging it. We really are proud of Secret 12. Thank you so much, brother.
It's great. Thank you. Well, thank you. It does work. It does something to the synapses.
Well, thank you. So, I mean, I've asked so many questions here, but front and center, what are you most focused on right now?
Well, you alluded earlier to some of the trials and tribulations that I've been experiencing at the University of California. It's been almost not complete, but almost a complete reversal of fortune since that time. And the reason for that, again, it goes back to the power of information and analysis and the power of the pen, because my book came out and everything that I've been talking about and teaching at the classroom level is now codified three-dimensionally in a book. Also a colleague of mine who's been harassed continuously, and just to show you the viciousness of the university system, she was declared clinically dead due to a massive health crisis, which I won't go into detail. And she published a path-breaking law school journal article, which, by the way, if any of your listeners or viewers internationally or in the U.S. would like a copy of that journal article, have them email me and I'll send them a PDF of it. It's a great article because it combines her own tribulations as a woman, as a female, as a scholar who's trying to forge new paths in academic and social cultural analysis, who was relentlessly persecuted by her own department, who, by the way, are also Asian American. So this idea of uniform white oppression is really, 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 it's a cliche. It's becoming cliche, and it's not really completely accurate anymore. We have to get beyond that.
Yeah, gangs of humans oppress other humans, period.
Absolutely. And in yesterday's concluding lecture, I got a box of chocolates and a card from an appreciative student. But at yesterday's lecture, I pointed out that Mao Zedong, who was, of course, as you know, a Yale in China, and he was cultivated by the OSS. You've spoken to that many, many times in this show. And that information is available in mainstream publications, histories. I cited the fact that he's Han Chinese, and he was responsible for the death of upwards of 80 million fellow Han Chinese. So where does the race and ethnicity critique fit into that model? It doesn't really explain it. The race, ethnicity, gender critique does not explain the economic meltdown that we're experiencing currently. And I think, and I'm working on this is speculative, but I think that the diversion of energy, intellectual, scholarly, and student energy from the real important monumental issues of our time has itself been engineered. It seems like the foundations are pouring tons and tons of money on race, ethnicity, and gender studies to the exclusion of other modes of analysis. And that comes out of the elite institutions so that people like Professor Gruber can do his dirty work in the dark. This is what's going on here. And same with the humanities. Again, speculative, but the reason why students are dropping out of the humanities in droves is because there's something called the theory scare that took hold in academia in the 1970s. And I think I alluded to this in an earlier conversation with you. Instead of reading the great classics, Dostoevsky, which I'm reading again now as an adult, it has a much more impact on me as a grown-up person. Instead of reading these classics, they were just engaging in literally fraudulent high theoretical philosophical screeds by people like Paul Diman. They were people that were imported primarily from France. And I think that was a psyops. If any enterprising PhD student wants to do a forensic analysis of it, it was sort of like the 1960s when all the LSD and the peace and love and the fake counterculture was brought in by people like Stuart Brand and Timothy Leary. Once that glow started to wear off, the humanities, which traditionally has been the source of dissent and incisive, speculative thinkers with artistic skills that can help humanity progress forward. They brought all these foreign intellectuals like Jacques Derrida and all these people. They're still studying in the English departments. Now, if they started studying the humanities, the Renaissance, classical Greek, Roman societies, Sumerian, Babylonian, from a New World Order perspective, looking at some of the occultic elements that underlie these different cultures, I think they would have students hanging off the rafters in humanities courses. They're bored. Students are not buying it anymore. They're sick of it. The race, ethnicity, gender model has been in place for 40 years. It's been funded by the Ford Foundation. And by the way, there are academic books coming out right now, currently, that are tracing institutionally how entities like the Ford Foundation have hijacked academic discourse, scholarly production at the university.
Well, sure, and Eisenhower, in his farewell address, warned of that, not just the military-industrial complex. He talked about an academic elite in intellectual circles creating, with federal funding, a unified system, because they are worried about classical liberalism, Thomas Jefferson liberalism.
Absolutely.
They're scared to death of it, so they create mainly like a new cult of it, where either men only sit around and talk about sports, which is its own mindless diversion, or let's talk about race, and let's talk about sexual stuff, and let's talk about, how women, instead of just living and actually being liberal and free and open and being tolerant, instead it's you must adopt the one thing we're pushing. And then we learn it wasn't about tolerance at all. It was about getting in the mode of following orders, and that it's actually a great tyranny that we're facing.
It's a form of control, political, economic control through cultural indoctrination. And unfortunately, the university has been transformed into the site of this indoctrination.
Well, I know why your students are sick of it, because when I hear it, when I walk in and people are watching ESPN and they start wanting me to talk about it, I don't even get mad at them. I just leave. Or whenever people sit around at a table, I go to dinner with somebody and they start bringing up race and, from a liberal or an other side of it, I'm like, hey, I'm done. I'm not discussing it. And I'm not saying I'm some great goody two-shoe, but as you said, these issues, they took real evils, magnified them, set up a whole system around that with guilt when it has nothing to do with it. And now they've replaced it with all these new despotisms, all these new oppressions. And they're just using it as this hot button issue where I don't care what color you are, people are paralyzed by it, and then actually don't mingle with people that look or act different because they're all so scared. And then, as you said, they can all then be controlled by their little local racial capo, who then interfaces with the foundations and the government. And if any of those capos or chiefs ever get off the reservation, their money's cut off, they're targeted. But I think what you got at, you were attacked at first, but then when you fought back and didn't back off, then you got more support and the system backed off. And that's what I've experienced. When we have the facts, when we have the truth, when people are hungry for it now, when real revolution is in the air, a revolution of ideas, we're selling ideas that no army can stop. I mean, as Victor Hugo said, no army can stop an idea whose time has come. And that time has come. And I don't think the establishment can put this thing back together again, Professor.
They cannot. The truth, writing, research, InfoWars, this will win the day for us. But in addition to that, it doesn't hurt if you lawyer up as well. And I engaged the service as one of the best. He's Mr. Dan Siegel. He's a civil rights attorney in Oakland, California. He has whipped the UC any number of times. And in my situation, he's going to hand them their butt. So it also takes the threat of a nice butt kicking, too.
Well, good job. Good job.
Thank
I'm glad you're able to continue with your free speech, because when you study real globalist publications, it's all conspiracy. I mean, it's not even really... Absolutely. Mainline history books, it's in there. It's just that the students aren't given any of this.
They're not. There's just sort of an inculcated linkage blindness, as I would call it. A lot of it has to do with the fact that most professors stop growing after they receive tenure. They think that they're over the hump there. But they're going to start waking up really quickly when they learn, through my efforts and other people's, that our pension funds and our retirement and our investment funds are going to be systematically looted. And by the way, the University of California, this is a warning to other institutions, public institutions or not. It seems like they're going for the so-called sustainability economy. So they've hitched their investment wagon to the gore and blood team, blood and core investment team, sustainability, weather change, Agenda 21, as you alluded to earlier, because most people at universities are sort of hippy-dippy. They want to drive a Prius and wear Birkenstocks and have a ponytail.
And that economy bankrupted Spain, so they've got to know they're hitched to a loser, and it's meant to lose. They don't want a real sustainable economy. They want the sexy austerity. I go to Whole Foods and half the magazines are, it's great to be poor now. It's so cool. But then meanwhile, Obama's flying around on Air Force One telling Africans they can't have cars or air conditioners. I mean, why not say you can have clean cars and clean air conditioners? I mean, it's just, they're teaching us it's not good to progress as a new dark age to stop the renaissance that threatens the monopoly of power. We're going to do two quick segments before Billy Corrigan joins us with phone calls straight ahead. Pete, Eddie, Julio, Frank, Dr. Kelly, and others. Your calls are straight ahead on the other side of this break. I'm Alex Jones, prisonplanet.tv.
Oh, hey, it's an honor to speak with you, gentlemen. Dr. Yamamoto, do you foresee any top elitists like having a change of heart and like becoming whistleblowers, or are they too entrenched in their divide and conquer mindset?
I don't think anybody is free of the possibility of conversion or coming to their senses. The story of Saul of Tarsus is quite instructive, right? As Alex mentioned earlier, he was basically a thug, a brute, an enforcer for the Pharisees, and he had a radical change of heart and spirit and mind. So yes, it's possible, and I'll go a little bit further than that. I foresee larger and larger numbers of defections from people as they feel their own self-interest being threatened.
You're absolutely right. And look, it's easy to cheat. It's easy to divide people. That's why so many cultures do it. There's always going to be some element of manipulation. Nobody's perfect. But we're into a decadent cycle right now where it's so intense, and they're using high-tech media systems to do it, and it's so toxic to everybody. We have to have a cultural awakening to these tactics and then reject them, just like we rejected GMO or non-organic, and it will start new economies of truth, new economies of being honorable, a re-entry of the age of chivalry, but 2.0. Thank you, Pete. Great question. Eddie in Illinois, you're on the air with Professor Hamamoto.
Yeah, how you doing, Alex?
Good, brother.
I just want to say real quick that I'm in the middle of changing my life, and I have a question. I bought the DNA Force and Oxy powder. I lost my job. 816-820-57.
Hold on a second. Hold on one second, brother. We can't give phone numbers out on air, but I appreciate that because somebody could call in with somebody else's number as a form of harassment. And I'm not saying you're doing that, but we can't give phone numbers out. Sometimes we can give out 1-800 numbers because if it's a known number, but that's a tactic. Sometimes people call in to talk radio and give out, say, their ex-wife's phone number. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. I just want to say I am in the season of giving, in Illinois, they're saying you can't film the cops. It's going to be a felony. I'm getting ready to be evicted. I'm a very good person. I'm just wondering how I can, I pray to God.
No, I hear you, brother. I hear you, and I appreciate your call. You could give out your email if you wanted people to contact you locally and have them work with you. What's your email? Well, he's gone. You're going to see that as the economy collapses and more people can't get a job and are kicked off their unemployment. You're going to see more of that desperation. We have 50 million people roughly on food stamps. Imagine 50 million people a day lined up at soup kitchens. That would really expose what this economy's been converted to, Professor.
Absolutely, and those numbers are rising. They're beginning to affect the middle class, and with the lowering of immigration barriers, you're going to see a lot of professionals in the IT business and computer science and engineering affected by foreign workers.
And then that gets rid of one of the only first world countries which then there's no point for the third world to run here. It's a giant sinking. It's a giant race to the bottom, as Ross Perot warned us. We'll be back in 70 seconds, and we'll talk to Frank, Dr. Kelly, Edward, and others. Stay with us. Billy Corgan is in his hotel room. He'll be on with us in the next segment. Billy Corgan. We're taking phone calls right now. We're going to go to Frank in North Carolina. You're on the air with Professor Hamamoto. Go ahead, Frank.
Yes, Professor, I just wanted to lay out a quick 10-year observation, and then I would really value your opinion. I'd like to ask you a question. I'm sure you'll have a good, interesting response. But I figure you're probably more intelligent, more informed than 99% of the people I come into contact with in any given year here in my area of the country. Now, I keep seeing these headlines of the CIA justifying torture based on the 9/11 attacks. And I hear all these people calling into all these talk shows in my area, mostly saying that they agree with a policy of torture because of 9/11 and all that. Now, I know that 9/11 was, I guess just for the purposes of brevity here, an inside job. And I hear from people, insiders like Dr. Steve Pachenik, that say that overwhelmingly the American people do not believe the official story of the 9/11 attacks. And I just keep wondering, I've been away for 10 years. Where are all these people?
You're listening to niche, fake right-wing radio where people just regurgitate talking points, the same cult as Democrats do. And so that's why you have pockets of this in many areas of the country, as you have pockets that are really awake. I'd say 30% are really wise to what's going on. Another 20% knows something. And about half the public just doesn't care. But still, that type of percentage is huge. Let's get the professor's take on that.
I'm skeptical of the numbers that are being produced there about supposedly the majority of American people being in favor of torture. I was perhaps trying to attribute this hype to these trolls that call into these programs. You notice these individuals who are pro-torture do not call into the Alex Jones show. I don't hear them calling into Savage Nation. There are all these small, really local television and radio programs that court this very small constituency, and it's still very difficult for me to wrap my mind around any notion that most Americans who are good and moral individuals, by and large, would accept the abuse, the humiliation, the torture of human beings. I think most of them are like Joe Biggs, who quite poignantly talked about the screams, and then the weeping, and then the silence that followed, and that progression. That's deeply affecting to most human beings, but perhaps I'm underestimating.
Well, sure, and plus intellectually, it destroys the judicial system. You can't believe any confessions anymore if torture's going on. I mean,
absolutely, it completely, and perhaps that's why the torture regime has been put in place, is to produce rot from the inside out and from the top down.
Well, sure. Plus, there's the schizophrenic hypocrisy where anybody else that ever tortures bad. North Korea's bad, or Nazi Germany's bad, or, you know, blah, blah, blah. But, oh, my gosh, when we do it, it's good.
No, let's stick to the moral high ground. You can't go wrong by just doing what's right and what's moral and what's just.
You're right, though. It is an attempt to infect us with corruption.
Absolutely. This is part of the destruction of the culture. This is psyops. This is programming of the highest sort, appealing to the basis aspect of human nature.
Well, Professor, I have to plead ignorance, and I apologize. I did not know you had a new book out. I'm going to read it as soon as it comes in, and as soon as that happens, I want to get you on for a full hour to go chapter by chapter through how you've put this into a scholarly dissertation on the subject. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you so much, Alex, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you.
Thank